Welcome to the Blue Collar Millionaire Show. I am your host, Chad Hufford, and this is the podcast where we celebrate the unsung heroes of the working world. Each week, we dive into the incredible stories of honest, hardworking folks who have found financial success through grit, determination, and good old-fashioned elbow grease. So if you're ready to be inspired and learn how to turn your hard work into your own success story, you're in the right place. This is the Blue Collar Millionaire Show. All right. Well, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Blue Collar Millionaire Show. I have Sam Center here with us, who is actually a longtime friend, been working together professionally now for several years. And Sam has spent his entire adult career in the oil field, essentially. And one of the things that Sam has always struck me about you, you've had a very future-focused mentality from an early age. And I know it hasn't always been a smooth process, but there's a lot of reasons to kick financial planning, kick saving for retirement down the road. It's one of those problems, or not problems, it's one of those things that seems like, okay, we know it's important, but I don't need to do it today or even this week, and it can get moved down the road. And we both know plenty of people in the industry who have pushed this down, months turned into years, years into decades. Now they're in their 60s trying to get off the slope, and they've really never had a plan. How important was it to you to get started early, even if you didn't have a perfect plan, so to speak, but just being mindful of you're going to want to retire one day?
Yeah. I mean, I guess a little of my story with when I was starting out, like I told you, I was not very intentional on, I just knew that I didn't want to be poor. What I wanted a pathway. I wanted at least, it might've been a coach seat on the plane, but I wanted a way to retire, at least not have to work, when I'm in my 60s, or at least have the option not to. So although I didn't start off as intentional as I eventually got, because I've been working like professionally for 14 years. The first 2 years were, I would say, learning a couple of really hard lessons. Obviously, is not making the money that I'm making now, but even then, I was trying to figure things out. Like I said, the first 2 years I did some really poor financial things, but I also I'd almost say it was a good learning experience. And then after those first 2 years, I mean, I've consistently put at least 20% away for retirement, and then had money left over to do alternative, real estate type investing.
So going back to those early years, then it wasn't like, you graduate college, you're all of a sudden this investment genius. You had a bumpy road. You have a vacation.
Yeah.
That's
my favorite story, and because it gets worse and worse as the years go on. I was around, I think, $7,000 to go and fund a trip to Thailand. And if you look at the S&P 500 returns, if I would have just stuck it in there, it's something like 430%. I mean, now you're looking at, in the 30s of what that trip actually cost me. And by the time I retire, if you just assume like 10%, that's something, it's going to be over 100.
Yeah, it's a six-figure vacation.
So I like looking back at that, and that's being intentional with every dollar that you have. I think that's kind of a good antidote for me, at least. That really stuck with me as time has gone on, because I've been able to periodically, every couple of years, I'll look at the S&P 500, what it's done, and be like, wow, that was very expensive.
So you've learned to use that mistake, though, as a educational experience rather than a shaming.
Shamed myself, but no, it's definitely, I like that.
But you've pivoted from that.
And I think especially in your early 20s, coming out of college, I'll share with, I started off at 66,000 with a 2,000 sign-up bonus. That seemed like a lot of money
for a broke college student. Yeah.
And honestly, after spending all the time at school, I felt like I deserved things that I didn't necessarily deserve. Now, the things I did right, like, even though I was definitely living beyond my means, I would say, because I felt like I deserved the vacations. The way I grew up, we didn't have, we had fully paid for cars. The house was paid off. So I lived with a bunch of people. I was paying $300 in rent. I was driving a really shitty Ford Ranger truck with a couple 100,000 miles on it. So I did do some things right there. Wasn't really budgeting like at that time at all. And I didn't feel like I was making enough that I could put a ton away at that time. I was more in the, I'm in my early 20s. I'm going to have fun mindset. And honestly, I'm not going to I wouldn't beat my younger self up for what I was doing, because it kind of shaped, like, I was like, if I wanted, I would say that's like a normal American's, that's a normal American mindset. And I realized I wanted to break out of.
And I think that's what's important is, I think what you went through is very normal, and you were making very good money for somebody your age. And I think that can actually give somebody a license to create worse financial habits. You have a longer rope to hang yourself with, so to speak, but you allow that to be a season in your life rather than dictate your financial identity, so to speak. This is how I am. You realize this is a behavior. These are patterns that I can't continue doing indefinitely. When did you start making that shift to start being more purposeful and making intentional sacrifices for the future version of yourself? How old were you, do you think?
I was probably 24. So
Okay.
like I said, the first 2 years out of school. And honestly, even when I was doing it, I was like, I knew I needed to get my shit together. Like I just knew. What happened was I got a job back in Alaska. I got a pretty sizable like sign-on bonus for me at the time. It was like $9,000. And that felt good having that in my bank account. I was like, I don't want to spend this money, like, because this is now I have a nice buffer. I didn't have any debt at that time either. I mean, so it also, I was influenced by a bunch of people that were around me that were doing very well. And I wanted to try and emulate what they were doing. So I did start at that time, talking more about what people are actually making and seeing at like their income levels, what they were able to do. And like I said, I was trying to find, I didn't really have when I say it wasn't intentional, I also didn't have at that time, I don't think, the right resources really to, the internet has everything on it, and you can find
Drowning in information.
Yeah. So like I told you, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So I was like, I had some ideas about debt. I wasn't going to go, I don't think I necessarily in retrospect, I definitely did over leverage myself on the real estate side. My mindset at the time there was, one, this is a horrible mindset to have, but if I needed to, I could just I was so young and didn't have any assets. If it really, and also at the time is so much different than where we're at now. Because I mean, this is 2012. We're still recovering from the 2008, financial crisis. So
real estate was on sale.
It was crazy on sale, that I didn't feel like I did. I've always been good at, although I'm impulsive, I've been good. I have pretty good risk management.
So they were calculated risk.
I felt like it was calculated risk. In retrospect, I wouldn't necessarily make the same choices. They worked out for me, and they were able to get me to where I'm at today because of those choices. But
you're also 24, 25 years old, thinking about where you were going to be 2 or 3 decades down the road.
Correct.
So even if the tactics you chose at the time might not be exactly how you do it, you were still figuring things out and working towards sacrificing for the 50, 60-year-old version of yourself.
Right.
So what would you say to somebody who thinks they're too young to start planning for the future, or maybe to your 22-year-old self that didn't think they were making enough money to start putting anything away?
401k story, because compound interest, as Benjamin Franklin said, is one of the best. I mean, if not, it's like
The eighth wonder of the world.
wonder of the world.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, that right there, it's, if you leave your dollar static, it doesn't take much for it to start snowballing and I mean, if you think about 7,000 is not that much. I mean, now it's not that much to me, but like it's not that. If people are more intentional with their money early on, it really does set, like, if I put aside $7,000 now versus then,
You have to work so much harder now.
so much harder. And the 20s are it's the best decade to invest to set you up for the future.
And to your point, you don't need to put a ton away
No.
in your 20s or even early 30s to make a big difference
No.
in your 60s. I think the other thing is just habit formation.
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
Just getting used to putting money aside, reminding yourself, because saving in a 401k is a tangible reminder to yourself that you're the type of person that makes sacrifices for the future. And I think that's something that has always stuck out to me, because when I first met you, you're like 13, 14 years old working out at Powerhouse,
Yep.
something like that. And you were doing track and field, right? Or
I was doing
cross country. And I remember working with you on some sprint stuff and, like 15-degree incline, running sprint after sprint.
Yep.
Did you ever puke?
What?
Did you? Okay.
I might have hit it because I'm like, I don't want Chad to see me puke.
But I remember you took a lot of abuse. I mean, those were rough workouts. At that same time, I was training some professional fighters, and I mean, I had professional fighters quitting workouts that you were doing as like 14, 15 years old, which I reminded them in the middle of their quitting, like, I've got high schoolers doing this, guys. Like, how much of that background in athletics and training and essentially just committing to hard things, how much has that carried over into persevering and being patient for the future?
I think the best way, because now that I have a kid, because I've thought about that, and I have family who grew up in very similar circumstances to me, who don't have as much grit, I would say. And I think being physically uncomfortable is probably, that has to be part of the equation because if you can figure out how to be physically uncomfortable and okay with it, I think it translates into being uncomfortable in other parts of your life, or willing to sacrifice. And, because while I was doing that, I could also have been sitting on the couch. I mean, I could have spent the same time. And that's, if you want to tie it back into, the finances, there's a reason. I'm driving I make well over six figures, and I drive a $4,000 truck that I bought at an auction. Now it's worth a lot more than that because I put money into it. But the point is, it's like, it's stuff like that, especially where I work, being around people who are very successful, or at least they make enough money that they
have nice things.
They have nice things.
Yeah.
It's really easy to be like, I want those nice things too. The thing is, you have to pick your uncomfortable. Pick how you're going to be uncomfortable.
You have to pick your sacrifice. You're sacrificing one way or the other. And, so that kind of brings me to what I also wanted to chat with you about, this idea of keeping your ego below your income.
Yeah.
Because you have very quickly, given your age, very quickly risen through the proverbial ranks in the oil field, make a very good income. But yeah, you're driving, how old is your truck?
9 years old.
9 years old, and was it one of the?
Yeah, I got a good deal.
Yeah. I mean, so when we're talking about that, and it's not like you're living in poverty, but you've given yourself some luxuries, but you've also lived very, very simply. I mean,
I mean, for me, I know what I personally value, and maybe that's part of it. I like going, we went to Disneyland and dropped 22 grand less on a whim. I mean, that was, like arguably, once again, I myself up to be able to do that,
right,
because I sacrifice in other areas.
Years and years of
personally value more than, say, having a $600,000 house or,
$4 jeans or
$4 jeans, whatever you want.
Well, and people get so concerned about the complexities of an investment, but if you're not living within your means, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
You've been maxing out your 401k for quite a while now.
Probably 10 years now, yeah.
Mid-20s?
Yeah, mid-20s, yeah.
And as we've already alluded to, I mean, some of those, maxing out your 401k in your 20s is a six-figure chunk of money.
Oh, yeah.
Around retirement age. So even if your investments were not top tier, shooting the lights out, 5-star funds, you're still crushing it long term because you decided at a very early age that you were going to keep a significant margin between what you made and what you spent.
And that's exactly, I think, where people run into problems, and it really is life creep.
Yeah.
That's bottom line. That's why, talked about dumpster fires, like probably the biggest dumpster fire, and my sister being a surgeon. I mean, because of you, because she works with you as well, she's been smart enough to surround herself, get a good team on her side. She's not the most financially savvy person, but she's smart enough to know that. But you can see with like some of her peers, where like even the next level of when you're making 600 to $1 million a year, but still just because you have a large salary doesn't mean you're rich.
Well, it certainly doesn't mean you're wealthy.
Or doesn't mean,
yeah.
It's death by, you have $100,000 car, your wife has $100,000 car, you got 2 snow machines, and then you have $1 million+ house. That you don't really have that salary anymore. I mean, it's death by 1,000 payments.
Well, and at that point too, you have a bigger shovel to dig yourself a deeper hole. And I think so many people think that more income is going to solve financial management problems.
Yeah.
And
and that's I think initially, honestly, with my life, what I was able to do stop early on was that life creep. I think I realized this 66,000 I was making a year. Honestly, I think it was a combination of I was trying to do too many things at once, including my lifestyle. Once I hit around the $90,000 range, it became a lot more manageable. So I would almost say where my lifestyle was, it was a cash flow problem to an extent. But then I never really left that level of, but my lifestyle didn't really change. Even after having it, obviously I'm married now, I got a kid, other expenses, it does go up a little bit because of that, sometimes a lot, but it really is, it's living below your means, not being influenced by, you don't know other people's situations. That was my problem for a long time. I'm like, how do these people, I know what I make, how are they affording what they afford? The thing is, all I know is, last week, on my Alaska Airlines credit card, they just changed my limit to $45,000. It's like, that's how the majority of Americans are paying for that HELOCs.
And if you have a large income and decent credit, they'll allow you to max out your debt on almost anything. And I think like what you said there is important. Like looking around and wondering, how are people affording what they are? They're not. And they're stealing from the future version of themselves. So like living within your means doesn't sound sexy. It's not like this breakthrough advice. Like it's really simple, but it's kind of like somebody trying to lose weight. And you're just like, well, you have to consume less calories than you burn.
Yeah.
Very simple concept. Yeah. Very difficult to practice with any kind of consistency. Yeah.
And it's also, it's people are good at doing things for a short period of time, but it's getting into that mindset and habits, because it is the thing in our society, especially, it's so frictionless being able to, we went and looked at, I was just looking at a new vehicle for my wife, like us, we were going to looking at a GTI. I mean, they had the papers out before we even left. It's like, hey, we're literally just checking this thing out. And it's so, especially if you are in the six figures, I honestly think it's why teachers are what, like for Ramsey did the 10,000, millionaire study, 10,000 people. And what, it was like engineers and teachers afterwards. Mm-hmm. They're not pulling in six figures. Well, they might be dual income, but it's so much easier, I think, as your income increases, because you're able to take on so much debt. And then it's the psychology of being able to, well, I make $200,000 a year. I can afford another $1,600, car payment. And that's where people get into trouble. I know that's where a lot of my coworkers get into a lot of trouble.
Well, look at professional athletes. Didn't know how to manage money when they were poor. Now they got multiple millions coming in. They don't know how to manage.
Yeah.
And it going bankrupt, lots of other problems too. And I think what you said is important about just your environment. Like, you work in close proximity with the same people every hitch, but 2 weeks at a time, which, I mean, there's some positives in that, but also being careful who you surround yourself with, because you can get that lifestyle creep, seeing what this person's doing. And as your income grows, the Joneses around you spend more money. So like you talk about, a surgeon who, the Joneses for a surgeon, yeah, it is the 6-figure cars and the 7-figure homes. It's, unless you put a lid on that spending, nobody's going to do it for you. So just as we wrap up here, what you mentioned was consistency a few minutes ago. And I think that's the most critical piece. It isn't what you do one day. It isn't what you can commit to for a year. We've used the analogies like fitness. I mean, same kind of thing. It's that it's a lifestyle commitment. And I just want to tell you, known you for a long time, and you've shown incredible consistency in a lot of different areas, but I'm really proud of you.
Coaches and mentors, which I consider you one of them, definitely. It's not just surrounding your people, it's what you're taking in, because especially now with the advent of social media and all, COVID, really, I think, especially when the market's on fire, all the people coming out of the woodwork of essentially get rich quick schemes and like just really horrible advice that it's like you said, it's not that hard as long as you are consistent. I think I've been very successful outside of just putting money in my 401k, but honestly, take the other half of what I'm worth aside, I would be fine financially at the end of the day just by putting 20% into my 401k a year. And that's, at any income level. What I liked about that, it's like, it didn't matter. You just get used to that you're paying yourself first before you pay everything else. And then if that's built in, then even if you have the mindset of, I'm going to go buy a truck or whatever, you're just looking at what's coming in your your paycheck after that. It's almost like tax. It's tax to yourself.
Yeah.
And I don't know. That's what I think anybody starting out, it really is. It's real early habit forming at any income level. We just will do not only financially, but just psychologically, it will do wonders as your income grows.
And being patient with yourself too. If you're off track, be patient with yourself to get on track. And you were able to get on track very, very early. That's not going to be everybody. I just remind people too, like, it's never too late to start doing the right thing. There's things you could have done maybe a little better here and there, but at 25, you were starting to get things pretty well in order. For some people listening, they're going to be 45, 55, and they're like, man, I've missed the boat. But it's never too late to start doing the right things. So just be patient with yourselves and doing the little things. Some of the little habit formation and And that's what you've done. And it's got you to where you are and being able to do, even beyond your 401k. So yeah, man, keep up the great work. And thank you so much for joining us and sharing some of your story.
Thanks for listening to the Blue Collar Millionaire Show. We hope this episode has been inspiring and beneficial to you. If you want help on your journey to financial freedom, reach out to us at veritasalaska.com. We'd love to sit down over a cup of coffee with you, either here in our office or virtually, and get to know you and your needs. And though this podcast is free of charge, we do ask that you please do us 2 quick favors. If you enjoyed the episode, give our pod a great rating on iTunes or whatever podcast platform you use, and also give us a follow on Instagram. We hope you have a wonderful day filled with gratitude and intentionality. God bless.
The information expressed is for general information only and is not intended to provide specific investment advice or recommendations for any individual. It is suggested that you consult your financial professional, attorney, or tax advisor with regard to your individual situation. Hypothetical investment results are for illustrative purposes only and should not be deemed a representation of future results.